All right, good evening. I will now call to order the Monday, June 3rd, 2024 Town Council meeting. If you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, first on the agenda is the approval of the May 2024 Town Council meeting memorandum. A copy's been posted. Are there any questions from councilors?
I've got one very minor edit on page 6 of 13, where it says, under my name, and I think like what we could do is that at the next meeting will be the big TIF onto this package. Onto this should be omnibus, and
Oh, okay.
that's my only,
Okay, I can change that.
all right, thank you.
Didn't register your vocabulary.
Enunciate.
Right. With that,
Any other questions or any other amendments?
Move to approve.
I got a first from Councilor McElderry,
second.
second from Vice President Burke. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is the approval of the 2024 payroll claims. Are there any questions from councilors? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the May 2024 payroll claims.
I'll second that. I got a first from Councilor Stein, second by President Plunkett. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is the approval of the June 3rd, 2024 claims. Questions from councilors?
I have a question. Okay, so Mia sent, I'm sorry, you guys, I really keep telling myself that I need to, contact you before this so that I can ask you the question, and then the meeting pops up, and I wanna make sure I at least address it. Mia sent the appropriation report, and so I was just scanning that and kind of comparing to the claims that have come across, and there's just two that jump out at me, and one of them is, for, I believe, the finance department consulting through Crow that came from a July 23 general console, 11,661.
Right.
And so that got me, I mean, I can understand, you've been telling me some of these fees you go back and forth on. It seemed a little long from July.
So they went through a transition on their billing system, and so last year, instead of billing us monthly, they billed us twice, 6 months and 6 months, but they inadvertently did August through December instead of July through December. So this is just getting that July to them.
So they had left off. Okay, so
Yeah.
the way it affects us though, because we're cash basis as far as tracking for our budget. So then I go back to, and this is, for anyone who's wondering where I'm going with this would affect if we hit our budgeted amount and then we end up being asked for more. So I'm just like pointing that out, like, was that amount known and included when you were budgeting? Because
No.
when I look at the appropriation report on percentages, and I'm sorry, I had to print my own appropriation report and.
Hold on one second. Did you say no, Cindy?
No, it wasn't
It was
budget.
not.
No.
It was not.
Okay.
But, so when I look at our appropriation report, I think we're around 30% left, and we're at the
Right,
5th month
right.
when I take these claims in. So I'm just,
So part of that is too, is that going into the year, we have been still using Baker Tilly on some of the stuff when we were transitioning from 23 and with our annual report. And unfortunately, the budget was already set even before that decision was made. So since the budgets are set, back in October, that's the reason why it's running a little bit short.
okay, because I am looking at finance contractual services. Would that come there, or consulting? Would that amount fall in?
Which one?
Would Crow's,
Honestly,
I
it
think
could
it's
fall into
consulting.
either one.
Okay.
Yeah.
well, both are at the 34 and 30% remaining of the balance that we had
Right.
budgeted for the year. So it's just,
Yes, and I watch those just to make sure that when we get close, if we need to have an ask or something like that, I'll make sure that happens.
I wasn't sure if there's some way we have another amount of this that is transferable between. That's where I was trying to
Right.
look in the appropriation report for
And
a
that's
slush fund of sorts.
the first thing I usually do too, is to see if there's anything that can be transferred to cover.
Okay, so that was one concern. I just was pointing out that that
Right.
kind of eats into your budget for this current year.
Yes.
And wasn't sure at what point we're gonna keep retaining their, between Baker Tilly and Crow's expenditures. Because this says it was Crow that was from July 23.
Correct.
Okay. I guess just more making a statement at this point, that
Okay.
now that you've clarified that. But the same thing is also happening, and I'm done with you, but Mike Dale's area, the same thing is happening with the engineering. And I had been told that we were bringing more in-house engineering expenses. And I still see us, it's gonna take me a second to find it, but I still see us having a claim, a substantial claim for engineering fees. And when I look at, here it is, it's in planning and zoning on page 4, if anybody wants to play along, on the accounts payable register. It's 35,800 that were for engineering fees for 2024. And when I go to planning and zoning's engineering on the appropriation, I think that's another percentage that we've used a lot of what was budgeted. And I'm just, yeah, we're down to 28%.
So usually with that, two things. First off, I know, I don't believe Mike's here,
He's
but.
not here, unfortunately.
But, and Lance might be able to correct me if I'm wrong on this, but they are transitioning out BLN, but there are still projects that BLN is working on. So
Right.
they're finishing out the projects that they've already been assigned to, and they're transitioning out. Now, as far as what is budgeted, that is one thing that every year, because, we bring in those fees as well. So every year, an additional appropriation does take place, because what we've brought in on the engineering fees, then we appropriate those back to the line. So it's kind of a pass-through. And it does usually end up going into the red before the end of the year, and then just the fees that we've brought in, we appropriate those to the line.
Okay. I think what concerned me was more the percentage left. That
Sure.
just when I'm scanning the appropriation report.
Sure.
I'm sorry, I think I only got this recently, so.
She
I-
sent it out today.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, wait, I didn't have that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, then that's just my question, is
Okay.
that we're scanning those.
Right. Yes.
So that we don't end up in an ask situation when we could maybe have said, hey, let's not use those
Sure.
consulting firms if we don't have to. So.
Oh, yes, I understand.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions on claims? I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Second from Counselor Melton. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next on the agenda is a request to speak on agenda item. I have one here. Amy, do we have any more?
No, we do not.
All right. We have Brad Gressel. We're request to speak right now.
Oh, we do?
Did I say mayor update? No.
Oh.
You said request to speak.
No. I thought you said no.
All right, so we have Brad Gressel. Brad, you've got 3 minutes, and what I'll do after 2 minutes is just kind of
Yeah.
give you
Got
a
it.
sign there.
Yeah, evening, council.
Good evening.
I just wanted to make a few
And I'm
quick
sorry, Brad, if you would just put your,
Ad-
state your name and address.
address.
for
You
the
got it. Brad Gressel, 3668 Evergreen. Just wanted to make a few quick comments on the Century TIF and bond ordinance that you'll be reviewing here shortly, specifically the pathway portion of it. And a caveat, and it's possible that some of these details might be in some of the legal documents that are attached. I am not a lawyer, but I've been involved alongside my neighborhood in Hidden Pines, and as well as Bridalwood and Brittany Chase, and working with this. So I just wanted to make a few comments. So we worked with the developer Century to basically figure out a way to use this project to fund the connections for the missing multi-use paths from the New Opelousas crossing down to Willow Road, which would be beyond their minimum requirements. That'd be right in front of the property. So To do this, $650,000 would come off the top of the TIF at the beginning to be used towards constructing this path. Benefits is it would bring connection to 3,000 and growing plus residents down to Willow Road, bring connection to District 5, which would be great. We don't have a lot of that. Last town council meeting, a few things were still missing around the concern of to ensure these funds are kind of protected for the specific path. So now at this meeting, we do have the developer or project agreement with the developer stating the intent to use their contractors to build the construction of this path. And the trust indenture now has what's called the Michigan Road Trail account that shows the amount and the location, which is great as long as everything goes as planned. So the question is this fund and these dollars protected as much as we can protect them? So I have some questions. Like, for example, what happens if the pathway portion of the project agreement doesn't materialize as stated? What happens, like specifically what happens? What happens if the town doesn't procure the land, doesn't secure it in time in that window, or the design plans aren't agreed to? Is it clear what happens to the funds? What happens if the developer's obligation window expires? Do the funds remain in the specific account for the specific location? The concern being if not, they'll get gobbled up immediately. So I also thought I was hoping to see the word like only in there, so because only goes to that, so just a thought. But again, it's more, again, some of these may be in there, or maybe they could be a little bit more robust to make this airtight, to protect these funds. It'd be a shame to lose these after everything we've gone through. So just kind of hope you guys can talk through those questions and maybe answer them as you're looking through it. Thank you.
Brad, will you do me a favor real quick and just repeat those questions one at a time?
I can sure try. I mean, they're all under the window of are they protected? But
Did you write them down?
You got 'em all?
I summarized it as, what if the pathway doesn't materialize? What happens to those funds?
yeah, there's kind of ideally, it happens as the project agreement states,
Right.
within that 12-month from commencement. If it doesn't, the land's not there, the plans aren't in place, and it doesn't happen, is it crystal clear what happens to those funds? Do they go back to that fund? Is it very clear they go only to that location and only for a path? Does that help?
It does. Thank
Okay.
you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Up next is the mayor and administration update. Mayor Stair.
Sorry, I was a little over anxious there before. But good evening, everyone. It's good to see everybody tonight. The first thing that we have in the administration report tonight is a banking RFP that we're going to put out this week, in which we'll invite other banks to make us an offer to house our accounts. We have 12 separate accounts, with the 3 major ones covering payroll, wastewater, and our general fund. Now, it's a good practice to go through this every 3 to 5 years. The last time we did this was in 2020, but we didn't act on it because we had problems with OpenGov and we had COVID. And before that, it had not been done since 2018, so we're overdue on doing this. The goal is to make sure that we're getting the best deal on fees and general banking expenses. And I expect to be able to report back to you on the RFP responses at your July 1st meeting. Also, I have an update on the discussions between us and Whitestown for us to take over the town court docket in Whitestown. We have an agreement in principle to the arrangement. Attorneys from both sides have signed off. The agreement is now on Judge Spencer's desk for her approval. And then after that, both town councils will have to agree. And by the way the calendar falls over the next several weeks, we expect Whitestown to vote on it first. And if their council approves, we will bring it to you on July 1st, is the plan right now. And also, as promised, I want to offer you an economic development update at the first meeting of each month. Yes, sir.
Can I ask a question real quick on the banking RFP? Will that also include P-card usage or no?
That's a separate arrangement.
Okay.
So we are thinking of moving P-cards from Chase to another bank because the state has switched, and that will be a way for us to maximize our rebates through that program.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I'll move on. Economic development update. There have been some positive movements at Creekside Corporate Park, and Corey Sharp is here to talk more about that.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, counselors. The RDC over the last couple months has taken some action involving some lots in Creekside. I believe we have a map of the Creekside. No. No, I believe this is in his slide deck, Mayor's slide deck. Okay. There you go. Thank you, Joe. First, I want to discuss lots 4 and 5. They are on the north east side of the park. The commission has entered into a development agreement with Fru's Vision for the purchase of lots 4 and 5, which is approximately 5 acres, for $359,060. Their plan is to build an office/healthcare facility, and they are currently working through their due diligence phase. So the process for us to sell land in Creekside has been, we enter into an LOI that highlights a very broad layout of a purchase. Then we enter into a more formal agreement that lays out their due diligence timeframe, some commitments on both sides, who's responsible for closing costs, things like that. Then once they work through their due diligence and make sure that their site, the site meets their potential, then we will work towards closing. Our hope is to close in 2024. The primary tenant of this office building will be Center for Sight, and their services relate to eyes and the face regarding medical, surgical, and aesthetic procedures.
Corey, can I ask you a question? You said 4 and 5, but on here, those are marked as available and not active interest.
This is a map that is just a standard map that we have been using. It's,
Okay.
but we
So
can
still
update
have
it on the
active
website.
interest in 2 and 3 as well,
And 7.
and 7.
Let me keep going.
Okay.
So Dr. Michael Beforas is the sole owner of Center for Sight, and he plans to practice for another 10 to 15 years. He does have 2 other partners, two other practicing members, one that is a similar age and one that is almost 30, so plans to practice for many decades to come. The reason why they chose Creekside is to have access to enough parking and square footage to grow their business. They are currently not located in Zionsville, and they are both limited. They are limited by those factors today. They cannot grow, and there's not enough parking. So they plan to build a 15 to 20,000 square foot building, and the business plans to expand with the building, growing to from 25 to possibly 50 employees, with an average salary of around $70,000 annual. As I mentioned, they are working through their due diligence time frame, and our hope is to close in 2024. So let me move on to 7 and 8. The RDC has received a letter of interest from Exclusive Land LLC. They have accepted the broad terms, the high-level terms of this LOI, which is to purchase lots 7 and 8, totaling 3.35 acres for $294,800 to construct a motorsport office building. In that LOI, they have also expressed interest in lots 2, 3, and then 4 and 5 if 4 and 5 fall away. So just for first right of refusal on those lots for the future. So we're currently working on developing a purchase agreement with them and expect to take that up in our June meeting, which is the last Tuesday of the month, 9 a.m. Our last couple meetings, we've also taken up some project agreements, development agreements, and then also the last meeting, we adopted RDC bylaws, which have never been put in place. We assigned roles to our officers and then created 2 standing committees, a finance committee and a governance committee. And then I'll touch on the Century project agreement when the Century agenda item comes up. But also, we approved a development agreement with Wild Air. And this is really to put in a hold on what our bond documents say, specifically associated with the transfer of the 10 acres of land, the dedication of that land at Marysville Road and Oak Road. We wanted to have in strong language to make sure that that land will be dedicated in a certain time frame. And so that's basically the outline of the project agreement, the big significant part of it. It also lays out, in addition to the bond documents, the bond terms of the developer receiving 100% of the proceeds, and that generally what the development economic impact is. So that concludes my update. I'm happy to take questions.
Corey, I've got a couple questions about Creekside. I didn't have any of the documents or anything on all the other stuff, so I've just got the Creekside
Yeah.
Stuff here. So if I'm hearing you right, the medical facilities in lots 4 and 5, exclusive land LLC is in 7 and 8, and if 4 and 5 goes through with the medical facility, then exclusive land will then move on 2 and 3 also?
Exclusive land has a specific offer for 7 and 8. That is their primary preference because that's what's available. If 4 and 5 falls through, then they have first right to take or to purchase 4 and 5 instead of 7 and 8.
Okay, so I guess I thought you said that 2 and 3 was also of interest from exclusive land.
They are.
Oh.
They are. And so they included options on if their due diligence, during their due diligence, they would like to have the first rights on lots 2 and 3. And I don't know if the commission will accept this first right concept in the development agreement. In the letter of interest, it's a non-legally binding letter, and it basically highlights the terms.
Okay, so I guess just to, again, kind of to back up and just to be clear, they've offered on 7 and 8.
Yes.
And if 4 and 5 doesn't go through, they would rather have 4 and 5. But
Yes.
either way, whether 7 and 8 gets sold to them or 4 and 5, they still want 2 and 3 also.
Their offer is the.
Yeah, I've got the same,
I'm
I've
Yeah.
got the same confusion, because I don't know if they want
Okay,
2 lots,
let me-
4 lots, or 6.
The price changes.
Their offer for $294,800 is for lots 7 and 8.
Yeah.
Right.
They have not made a price offer for any other lot, other than stating they would be interested in these lots if something should fall through on 4 and 5, on 7 and 8. The reason why they're interested.
Well, hold on. You're saying if something fell through on 4 and 5,
Five.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they're in, they want 7, they have an offer for 7 and 8. If 4 and 5 doesn't go through, they would rather have 4 and 5.
Right.
But where does the 2 and 3 come into play?
So 2 and 3 come into play for actually both of those properties dealing with stormwater. So 7 and 8, in their due diligence timeframe, they will investigate if there's adequate stormwater space on that property. If there is not, they want the option to put stormwater management on Lot 3, potentially Lot 2. Lot 2 drains off, and Lot 3 is very narrow. And so these are items that both buyers are contemplating to be able to put stormwater on their site, which is our preference, and the preference of the existing codes. So they're
Yeah,
going.
I was just trying to understand
Yep, that's-
if they're shaded as active interest, if that's the active interest, I'm
That
just.
is the
okay.
active interest. It's dealing with stormwater management.
And then do you know, two other questions, I guess, what's the sub-area F that shows active interest for where GRP is? What's
That is
the-
GRP.
Yeah, so what's the, I guess, why would it be active interest and what does sub-area F mean?
Sub-area F is a code associated with the PUD today, as it's written. And then sub-area C is also associated with the land use code. Active interest, it should be a sold and a star in there instead of a hash.
All right, last question, I promise.
sir.
So 4, 5, 7, and 8. Let's say both of those go through, 7 and 8 and 4 and 5. Will they both require a change to the PUD?
Lots 7 and 8, exclusive auto sports, would not require a change to the PUD. Lots 4 and 5 would require an amendment to the PUD because of medical office, and the way the current PUD is written is that medical office can only take up 30% of the building's square footage. So, that would be the amendment.
Okay,
Can I ask a question real quickly? So
thank you, by the way.
lots 2 and 3 sound like they are destined for stormwater retention regardless of what happens here. And I guess my question is, from a tax revenue standpoint, is that what we want? If those lots are sitting there without anything constructed on them, don't we generate a lot less tax revenue if it's just holding stormwater? It just doesn't seem like a great use of that land for us.
I would say that it's not destined for that, because we have entertained offers on these two properties. In fact, we're talking with another company that is thinking about making an offer on lots 2 and 3. However, in the process of figuring out how they can manage stormwater, this is an option. It is definitely not our preferred option, because certainly we want a building, office, whatever their employees, we want an active corporate park. But we also know that the challenges of Creekside are directly associated with how these lots are laid out. And Lot 3 is a very skinny lot, which basically gets us into a very narrow building that is very difficult to park. And then you have to put stormwater on top of that, which makes Lot 2 a stormwater facility for Lot 3. So it is kind of all an ebb and flow of figuring out how best we can create some activity in Creekside to the highest and best use. Either way, we've got to solve stormwater, and it might end up being underground. So
I'm still a little stuck on the shading of 2 and 3 and 7, but not 8 and 4 and 5. So this is just an old map?
we will update the map.
Okay. And I was hearing that 1 was a difficult build as well.
1 is a very difficult build.
So is there any way to like replat this so that 2 becomes more of the green area and we grow?
Absolutely. We have contemplated a lot of different options. Our first priority right now, though, is to bring in jobs to Creekside. And so we continue to have conversations with potential buyers. And if they are willing to work with us on the complications of the site, then we're certainly willing to negotiate with them.
Is this a standard pricing for these acreage?
No, it's a discounted pricing.
Seems like it.
So it's already discounted?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So So it's kind of like you're prepping us for underwater storage usage and that potential as we move forward on these lots?
Yeah.
That cost to go up, therefore maybe the price of the lot to go down?
Nope, we fully expect these prices to be locked in. We also fully expect that there not be any further requests for assistance from TIF, for example.
Right.
None of the projects in Creekside have been TIFed thus far, and we've been able to stand firm on that because we have a bond obligation payment out of the TIF funds, and we have an agreement with the school to split the TIF 50-50. In fact, if we're able to close on this land before the end of the year, we'll have cash funds to be able to make up some delayed payments for the school split agreement because there were not enough cash funds available in the Creekside TIF area. So there's not much to go around as far as TIF incentives there.
How many more years are on this TIF?
You know what? When I come back up, I will have that answer for you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions from counselors?
I'm kind of with some of you guys stuck on the stormwater issue. And thinking back to when I was involved with Creekside a little bit, I'm looking at the green areas, which I assume are green space, probably wooded. Are retention ponds or anything like that a consideration, or is that a no based on what it used to be?
Now, the green is actually owned by the Community Development Corporation. It is ravines and trails today. It very hilly and beautiful. If you haven't been out there, I would encourage you to walk the trails out there. When we were working with Graham Rahal on lots 10 and 11, one of the things that we amended in the zoning ordinance was to allow an open detention basin because it is more cost efficient to go that route rather than underground detention. We also want to have the aspect of sustainability and being able to filter naturally through an open system rather than a closed system using mechanical units is also something that allows us to think about this. It is the space that is very difficult to manage, especially when we're looking at skinny lots for lots 2 and 3. There is not enough physical space to put a 10,000, 15,000 square foot building, adequate parking, and then open detention. That would require underground parking.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Or underground detention,
Yeah,
not parking.
Any other questions from counselors? Thanks, Cory.
Thank you.
I just have a couple of more notes real quick. One of them has to do with communication. Our communication, I think, is a little bit scattershot between social media and our website and just other avenues that we have. So our communications manager, Caitlin Watson, has put together a template for a town newsletter that initially we're going to send out once a month. Maybe we'll go bi-monthly eventually. The first one went out on Friday, and it's meant to be a community bulletin board of sorts. Since we don't have a newspaper anymore, maybe this can be the clearinghouse for information. And in the future, we're going to ask town councilors and our department heads to contribute content to it. We think it's a good way to communicate with our constituents, and we want to encourage everyone to go to our town website and sign up. We want to encourage all of you to take part going forward in that. And then one final thing tonight, I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the 136th graduating class of Zionsville High School is coming up this weekend. Close to 600 students will get their diplomas, and it really is an extraordinary group of young people, and I think I'm okay to say on behalf of the town that we want to tell them that we're proud of them and we wish them well in all their future endeavors and congratulate them for graduating from high school.
And congratulations to your daughter.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Any have questions or anything?
Any questions for Mayor?
All right. Those on the board, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Up next on the agenda is council updates. Are there any updates from councilors?
I have an update. Thanks for that cue. I have received the check for the fire department from the citizen who would like to make the donation for the Lucas device. And I was going to bring it to the department head. I can give that to you from her. And just lovely. Thank you to her for taking a time of what was tragedy in her life, and recognizing the helpers and the town for being really key and giving family members extra life with the use of the Lucas. And thank you to her. So
Yeah, that's very cool.
it's a $25,000 check. So
Wow.
yeah, this is a
Very
big deal.
generous.
That's
Yeah.
very generous.
So.
Any other updates from councilors? All right, we will move on to old business. The first item on old business is a consideration of an ordinance authorizing the bonds. This is for Century. This is ordinance 2024-11. This is final reading. Would remind council that since we've heard this before, this would be the final vote for this. And we have Corey instead of Heather, right? All right.
And Matt Price is a backup. Good evening, counselors. Okay, I'm going to cover all of Century, and hopefully I tackle lots of questions while I give this presentation, and then I'll just address both of your agenda items in one presentation. Is that okay?
Well, we'll go to new business for the other one.
Yeah, for your action, but may I speak to it? Okay.
I mean, is it, I guess, is it,
Okay, this step, so you have two agenda items for the Century project. This first one is the bond ordinance, and this is the final step of the bond process to make sure that we statutorily are required to state the findings and approve the issuance of the Century bonds, and the maximum parameters of what those bonds are. This is basically, what you have in front of you is substantially complete. It is as far as we can take it until we have the closing. So Heather sent around an updated trust indenture prior to this meeting, and we updated it together with Counselor Burke in an effort to really solidify this commitment of constructing the trail with funds from the bonds. So first, Joe, if you could put that up for me. Howard. I feel like a little teacher, a big teacher, not a little teacher. Okay. You have had lots of different approvals at different times for this project. So there's been expansion of the TIF allocation area. That is your second agenda item. For the bonds, we have added some language in the trust indenture document. That will be finalized at bond closing. So what we have done is we've added language that states the issuer shall deposit a total sum of $650,000 into the Michigan Road Trail account. This account is held by a bond trustee and only for the trail. They also have a project fund, which is separate, that will go towards the other items that are approved in the bond documents. This account is to be used by the company, the developer, and others. that's important because others, as you will hear later, is the belt and suspenders to get the trail complete should something fail.
Corey, is this, and I'm sorry if I'm missing this, is this in our packet somewhere?
It's in the, it's what
The-
was sent around this afternoon.
Not the
Not
presentation.
this.
This right
Oh,
here?
the presentation.
No, this
Sorry.
is, no, I put this together after I spoke with Counselor Burke, just to help me outline how I was gonna walk through this.
Okay.
So, this first item is the bond closing, and all of those details are in your packet, the trust indentures. So this is just kind of my bullet line items. So their commitment is to build segments of the trail along Michigan Road from Appaloosa Crossing down to Willow Road. And then we've also attached an exhibit in the trust indenture and our project agreement. And those exhibits show where the trail would be located. We've also added language, this is on page 24 of your trust indenture, yes, sir?
I apologize very quickly. Joe, I apologize. Notification that sound isn't working online for some reason. I know people are watching, so. Go ahead. I apologize, Corey.
Maybe it's
That's
pulling
okay.
maybe pull your mic towards you. I don't know. People are saying they can't hear you.
Sure. Okay. So we have outlined that they need to construct this trail, all right? As a part of the construction of trail, they have this commitment to do the trail design. In our project agreement between the RDC and the developer, we state that the team to design the trail is DPW, the developer, and the RDC, just by way of us having to pick up the pieces if anything should fall apart. We also have a role, the RDC has a role during this design timeframe to basically hit the play button that says, once 421 forward is preliminary design is complete, we then provide written notice to the developer stating, you now shall commence design and coordinate with DPW to make sure that we are building an efficient trail.
So, so the trail planning process does not start until Michigan Road Forward is,
Preliminary design, until we know what's happening with the 421
Isn't
forward.
that like a 5-year projection, or
Yeah,
did I
that's-
miss that?
that could be a while.
It was like 5 to 10 years when they were.
I am unaware on the 421 forward project, but I know that DPW was very interested to make sure that this trail project aligned with the 421 forward plans so that we're not duplicating efforts or having to rip out a portion of the trail after 421 forward moves forward.
I mean, Lance is the expert. My understanding is that NDOT is prepared during 2024, this fall, to release their plans for construction that'll take place in 2027. And so therefore, we would have enough basic information to design the trail.
You would know more than me, but I was at that meeting and they acted like it was 5 years from now.
If I can bring some, I believe
Please do.
what I heard at the meeting was the preliminary design documents will be done sometime in early 2025. That might be accelerated to 2024, but as it sits right now on the priority list, I think it's slated for like 2030 or 2032 or something like that. But that doesn't mean that NDOT won't expedite that much faster. It's just the way that it currently is ranked in the list of
That's for the
priorities.
build, though, not the design.
That's for the build, but the preliminary design I heard was supposed to be done, here,
There we go.
Yeah. Sorry.
So yes, you're all very, very close. Of course, NDOT is hoping by the end of this year, early 2025, to reveal what the future of that corridor is going to look like. Currently, there is no funding for anything beyond the current effort. What I had heard was that they hoped to put together an internally competitive project that could be late 2020s and into the 2030s for actual substantial construction. But all we know now is they're going to wrap up this corridor study in the foreseeable future. Beyond that, we don't know anything for certain.
Thank you.
Lance, can I ask you a quick question? I've heard you say before that it might, I don't know that it was with this actual project, but I have heard you say sometimes it's worth going forward with something when we know there's going to be 5-year delay anyway. with
Oh,
this.
sure, yeah. I mean, I think the goal is not necessarily, I think the goal is to see where NDOT goes with this project, because remember, we have to get their permission to build anything within their right-of-way. So we could come up with this elaborate plan, and they're gonna look at it and go, oh, you know what, when we build this, we're gonna have to wipe all this out and buy, and pay for it again,
Yeah.
and they might be a little reluctant to allow us in their right-of-way. So there's a little bit of politicizing with NDOT to make sure that we don't harm their successes on a future project.
But you see.
But we could advance it anytime we want, yes.
Okay, if they came up with a plan that they were pretty solid with, that we could approach them, you think that that would be something they would allow, or historically,
That I-
are they kind of a?
I don't know.
Yeah.
This is uncharted territory.
Okay.
With a project of theirs on the horizon, I think that they would be very cognizant of adding future costs to their project. We could always go outside the NDOT right-of-way, but that immediately doubles the price because we're buying all new real estate along there. So it's really kind of a see what they're developing and how can we mesh for their best interest and ours.
Well, it's also, it ties into the concerns that our request to speak asked if the money would be saved only for the path, but, you know, time value of money, what is cement in 5 years from now? So does that create a future problem as far as being able to afford that portion of the path?
Well, I haven't read the trust indenture in its entirety, but I'm assuming these are going to be placed in interest-bearing accounts. So we're going to be building some interest over this at $650,000. I think the gist of the developer agreement is, look, we're all in for $650,000. We believe in talking to our contractor and our designer that we can design and build this for $650,000. What a lot of the conversation is about are the what-ifs. You know, what if there's more money involved? What if you have to purchase land? So that's where we have to realize that the town's gonna have to pony up if we want to keep seeing this project advance. So that's what I was looking for, is clarity in the agreement. What does that $650,000 pay for? So going into this, you have to understand that when those funds run out, we've got a couple of choices. We stop where we are. Maybe we've built 75% of something. We've got something in the ground. What happens to any residual funds? I think that's the biggest question that people want to answer, is will that go back to a secure account that can only be used until such time as the town then can come up with our additional funds and build the rest of the pathway? Did I get to your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Lance, you've dealt with NDOT probably a lot more than any of us have. I'm thinking of the timing of this thing and just, you know, we throw this thing down and they come through and change their mind and all of a sudden it's torn up. I mean, if it were you spending your dollars, would you wait until they were ironclad? Or, I mean, how do you deal with that from a timing standpoint? Because the last thing I want to do is drop $650K in the ground and then have NDOT throw us a curveball that tears it up.
So we have, I will say, we have limited experience in these types of relationships. We started building the Sycamore pathway along Raintree when that was still State Road 334. Then we ended up taking over the road, so we immediately wiped out all the challenges during that design process. So when NDOT comes in and and looks at a project, they will these are all generalities, right? Nothing is etched in stone, but they will replace in kind. So if we have constructed a 10-foot, 12-foot pathway in their right-of-way and they got to move that road out, and then they got to push that pathway out further, they're going to have to acquire more right-of-way. So that pathway we've put in that they've allowed in their right-of-way is adding to their project costs because they got to tear it out and rebuild it because they like to go back in kind. They won't reduce the amount of amenities in a corridor. So when there's no pathways existing, they might come forward with their typical suburban or urban cross-section and say, look, this is what we will provide you, is an 8-foot sidewalk right behind the curbs. Now, the town, if you want to do something different, I'm sorry, I've lost Corey's, don't want to lose Corey's page there. You're going to have to pony up for the delta. If you want something more robust than we're willing to give you, you're going to have to pay there. So there's just a lot of moving parts. And I think a lot of this agreement is advancing on good faith and intentions, and those are fine, but they can also burn you. So I really think with all of the uncertainties, you want to make sure that this $650,000 wholly, whether it's expended now or is deferred into the future, is truly reserved for that purpose, and that allows us to pick up on projects that don't come to fruition.
And how far does the right-of-way go from the existing road into the east? How,
It varies. Now, I believe the old NDOT right-of-way through there is 50 feet from the center line of the roadway. There are several developments where we've required them to put an additional 20 foot of right-of-way there, but generally, the apparent right-of-way is 50 feet from the center line.
thanks.
Okay, I'll be in the back.
Thanks, Lance.
Don't go too far, Lance. Yeah, I think Corey will speak to, I mean, I think that the concern all along has been knowing that we want this trail to happen, the constituents want the trail to happen. But there's a huge NDOT project coming. And so how do you make sure that you build the right timeline to everything Lance spoke about? And at least the questions I was really driving to was, how do you secure those funds for a long period of time to make sure that they're not used for another purpose if it's going to take longer than 24 months to build this? I think there's some clarification on that you came to around kind of 10 years. So I think Corey can speak to how the fund is set up and how it's set aside for a long period of time.
Yes, sir, thank you. So I have covered so far that we have a separate fund specifically for $650,000. We've also added language here under the highlighted that speaks to what Councilor Burke was just referring to, is that the trustee will hold these funds for 10 years and will transfer any remaining funds to the bond fund for the purposes of paying back those bonds if they have not been used during that 10 years. Now, during those 10 years, let's talk about that just a little bit. We've got the trail design, which NDOT is currently working on. We know we'll have preliminary design. They will then use 2025 to work on the trail design. Trail construction, once the design is complete, they have 12 months to construct the trail. If they are not able to complete that trail within 12 months, then the RDC, the others, as I mentioned, can step in and complete that trail with the bond proceeds. And that language is in the project agreement between the RDC and the developer. This was approved at the last RDC meeting. This speaks to, this is the trails section, and we talk about trail design and that the trail planning process commences when the commission provides written notice to the developer. So we control the start, and then at the end, it says, upon commencement, the construction or developer shall complete the trail project within 12 months, subject to force majeure. So, meaning, if they do not complete the project, RDC then can pick up the pieces and finish that project with the project fund specifically. Once the project is complete, the developer, let's assume the developer will do a stunning job and follow through on the commitments and get this all done. The developer then will submit a bond claim. The bond claim will come to the RDC for reimbursement of those expenses to construct the trail. The RDC will review all of those costs for the entire bond, not just the trail construction. And we do this this is part of our responsibility, is to review developer bond expenses associated with what they were approved in the bond documents to make sure that they're spending money the way that they should. We review that. We then tell the bond trustee that they've are approved for reimbursement of their costs, and it comes solely out of that $650,000 fund. As Director Lance mentioned, it is a cap of $650,000. So if the trail expenses are above that, then the town, quote, will have to pony up and contribute towards the completion of that trail. If the trail costs less than $650,000, then those funds can only go back to the bond for repayment of the debt obligation. It cannot be shifted into other project costs. So that basically highlights the bond trust indenture and specifically how the trail funds are isolated. Mr. Price, do you want to add anything? Okay. Yes, Councilor
Corey,
Melton.
what section does what section talks about the 10 years that you mentioned?
This is on page 24 of the trust indenture. This is what was added today.
Gotcha.
And previously, the last draft that you saw, it stated at a date to be defined. Because these dates are written or finalized at
closing.
bond closing. But we wanted to put a cap in it now because we know that it's important to you to make sure that, you know, we have a time frame associated with this, so we
How'd you
capped
come
it
up with 10 years?
It seemed reasonable. 1 year is too fast, right? 5 years is close, but, you know, given an act of God, you just don't know. So 10 years seemed to be reasonable, and that was the recommendation of Heather James, our bond counsel.
Thank you for sharing that with me. I didn't see the 2034 on there, but I see it now, so. I think that makes me more comfortable with the 10 years on there. I think that was a great addition by Heather and Brad or whoever worked on that. Vice President Burke, thank you. That makes me feel more comfortable as a Pathways member as we're hearing this. It seems like the 650,000, you know, as Counselor Sampson mentioned, I don't know if that's really gonna be enough to do it in 10 years or whatever the situation is, but the good faith and all the efforts put into this, you know, this makes me feel a lot better about the situation, and it does sound like the dollars can either go towards this project or the dollars can go back towards the bond payment. After 10 years, what happens with it again? Can you just refresh me on that? After the 10-year mark,
Yep.
what's the situation after 10 years?
So what it states is that after 10 years, the trustee shall transfer any funds remaining in the Michigan Road Trail account to the bond fund to repay the bond payments early, basically.
So by default, it automatically goes back and pays like it would be if there was a remainder? Okay.
Correct.
I think 10 years is reasonable.
I think we felt like 10, I mean, it could have been 20, but that's so far down the road. I feel like if this is gonna get done, and even if it's dramatically just pushed back, 10 years, it feels like we're definitely gonna be done with it and wrapped up by then.
And this is an asphalt path, or is this sidewalks?
A multi-use path is asphalt. Yes. And that $650,000 is a cost estimate provided by the developer's contractor based on the town's development standards.
And what are we, with Pathways, already aiming to do on? Do we have anything over there? I thought we had
Well,
something
this is
marked.
definitely a priority of the Pathways Committee. Pathways Committee set out 4 major pathway connections that we were eyeing pretty closely. By far, I believe that this one was the most, was gonna allow the most traffic to the town of Zionsville from that area. Next to West Oak is obviously on the radar because West Oak and East and West, from out west and Royal Run and Stonegate areas all the way, you know, obviously to town. But that's a big bite also. But we
Right.
control that, so we have some advantages to there.
In the Pathway Committee, your funding has been hopeful through this TIF. There's no other funding set aside for that high priority project?
So when we talk about funding and pathways committee, the
Yeah.
committee makes recommendations. The DPW really is in charge of how we align the priorities. We're going to make the recommendations to the council as well as DPW. However, there's no we have no
Right,
funding
I didn't know if you
control.
had any, like, direct line to Lance's ARPA dollars, or any sort of thing that
Well, I think
could-
that's where the Pathways Committee and myself will make these recommendations as the priorities, which we did, I believe in the fourth quarter of last
Yeah.
year, to kind of prep us for this next administration and us moving forward. And it really boils down to is, does this council also see the value in that priority, in closing this gap of pathway that we believe as the Pathways Committee needs. And there's several others around town that are high priorities as well, and we're gonna make some more suggestions. And we have a really nice list, and if you, I believe it's on the town website, some of our information, some of our minutes,
Yeah.
et cetera. But this one definitely stands out as one that will allow access to a lot more pedestrians and people in general. Again, next to the larger elephant, which is West Oak Street.
There's no restricted dollars, though, to this particular project. You may recall there were some ARPA dollars that were passed by the last council.
Yeah.
None of it was applied to this particular trail. There were some dollars that were put on 300, kind of going east-west, for a small portion of potential trail. So I do believe that at the time we were hoping that, at least last year, that this project, which was in the works, could cover this. And so it allowed ARPA dollars to be spent somewhere else.
And is it fair to say that Century is responsible for that segment in front of the development? So the 650,000, is that the town's contribution to the other two segments? Or are they paying for that portion that's in front of?
Their obligation is to build the trail from Appaloosa all the way down to Willow Road. So it does include in front of their project. They've got to build it
Sure.
all, and they'll spend as,
But had this TIF not been developed, had that area not been designed for this, they would have had to put it, is that not true? Okay. Correct me, please, Mr. Price.
For the record, Matt Price, representing Century. No, without the TIF, there would not have been a project.
Okay, so
there
that
would be
segment in
no
front.
segment in front of the building. Yeah, that's really a critical issue, is we've proceeded in good faith, believing that there was support for the project, which was unanimously approved by the last council, which included this trail component that we've worked closely with Hidden Pines, Bridlewood, and the property owners that we've talked to already about the availability of their land for a trail. Certainly haven't secured all those rights, but we believe that there are several very significant contributors who are on board for contributions at no cost. I think this will be one of those where you have to coordinate and kind of focus your resources on the few holdouts, a holdout or two along the way. But you can obviously do a lot of good with that $650,000, just based on who the kind of the coalition of the willing are, just from what we know today.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah,
Mr.
no,
Price. Appreciate
absolutely.
it.
Thank you for the opportunity to do that. And I should say too, we view Mr. Gressel and the RDC and the council really as partners on this. This is going to be an all hands on deck kind of thing, right? We're going to have to pull together to get this thing done. And one of the things Jordan Dorsey, who's watching online, is committing to do, in addition to the financial commitments in the project agreement, is really to help lead that and use his resources, his engineering team, to help coordinate with the town, and work closely with Brad Gressel and Pathways Committee going forward. And I think he's excited about his project and excited about making sure this happens.
Yeah, that's what I was going to add earlier when Sarah kind of asked that question about funding and all that. I mean, it's really a convenience thing at this point too, because he's already going to be out there
Right,
with earth moving, and he's willing to go way beyond the bounds of his property to do it
Right.
and it's convenient and the time's right, and
Yeah.
let's get it done.
And because we worked through the zoning issues,
we've talked to all the landowners. I mean, we basically know everybody from the south end of Appaloosa all the way down to Willow Road, because we've met with them all in connection with this project. So some of them are chomping at the bit to contribute their land. Others, I think, have legitimate concerns just because of where their properties relate to 421. But there's a lot of positive goodwill out there. I would suggest, I think Brad Gressel would agree with me on that. Yeah.
So then that leads to my, why don't we ask them if we can put the outside of the possible right-of-way now?
Yeah.
And see
Yeah.
how far we can get, because you say moving the land, if we end up with two missiles that actually miss each other, that we're moving the land while we're waiting for 421,
Exactly.
then we're not moving the land, and then it is more expensive.
Right.
So have we considered some of the pathway to just go for it now if people are willing
Sure.
to do further in? To me, that is the smartest planning.
Sure, absolutely. And that's exactly what would happen here. I think just the same way Zionsville would be if someone wanted to put an improvement into an area where they wanted to make a future road improvement, they'd be very protective of that area. And I would expect NDOT, and from other experience working with NDOT, that they're going to pretty much tell us where that pathway has to go so that they never have to pay for it.
Right.
And so I think there's not going to be a lot of mystery as far as the pathway for where this goes. I think that's going to be determined pretty much up front.
The mystery is the timing of it, right?
Yeah,
That's
the mystery will be some of the timing, but I think that's going to be sooner rather than later. I don't think it's there's some finite boundaries just because of where structures and utilities and things are. So I think they're going to be able to point us to the right area, just like they do on other pathways that are going in now along 421. That's done very carefully coordinated with the town's plans and with NDOT's plans.
I just almost think there needs to be some sort of break point where if we're not getting very far with 421, then we approach looking at where the right-of-way exists and seeing if Interactive is
Right.
willing to have a closer one. And so we get that part built, why we are
Yeah.
moving land.
I think what we've tried to capture, and you're always kind of at the mercy of words, but what we've tried to do is, in the trail design section, in section 2 of the project agreement, is we've defined what we've called a trail planning process. And I think that what we're envisioning is that's going to be a dialogue with all the stakeholders around the table to exactly deal with those kind of issues. I think what'll happen is the project will emerge from that process as we get more information from NDOT, as we know exactly who's on board to commit their land. The design will start to emerge from that process.
Okay, thank you. I mean, our concerns from the prior weeks were feeling like we didn't have a development agreement. Now we have an agreement that has a timeline, even though that timeline might miss 421, shouldn't, but it might. Do you feel you're part of it that you were concerned about before?
I think going back a couple meetings, I think what we were looking for in the development agreement were a few things that we just didn't see, which was even for very clearly defining where the trail would be, very clearly defining that there would be a fund that would be completely set up and how it could be protected, how it would be used, how long it would last, putting in parameters of what happens if 10 years goes by, or making sure that if for some reason something happens and Century can't meet their obligation within that 12-month after they begin the project, then making sure there's language that the RDC could finish the project. So I think a number of things that we're missing are all kind of in place. And to Corey's point, I think we've taken it as far as we can without the impact of the NDOT timeline. But the money's protected and it's there for a long period of time. And I would love to see this come to fruition, and of course, Century wants to get this done while their equipment is there. They don't want to have to come back in 4 years to do this. So I think we want to move it as quickly as we can, but there is some chance, and that was my concern all along, is we're doing this, but there's a portion out of our control, and that's the state. But I was very encouraged to hear that even potentially this year, or Q1 of 2025, we should have what we need to be able to put the plan together, and that still gives Century 12 months from when RDC says go to do the construction. And a lot of homework can be done now. So I'm thrilled. I think it's as far as we can probably get it to really guarantee that we can do this trail. As Councilor Melton mentioned, this is a priority of the Pathways Committee. It has been for a period of time. And I can tell you from, District 5, I'm sure that Evan knows this as well as Joe, that this is the top concern of people who live along that corridor. They want this trail. I've heard over and over again for the past year, this is the top priority, and they're all very invested in this process. They were engaged with Century, which I think is why we got to this point. So I think there's a lot of people who were really counting on this getting done.
And you feel that same way, because I know this was some concern
Yeah.
with your area, living over there.
Yeah, no, it's a major concern. My question, do we have a fully executed project agreement?
I have I'm not sure if the RDC has signed their copy or not, but I have a signed version of it.
In counterparts?
In counterparts,
Okay.
yeah. Thank you, counsel.
Okay.
I didn't want to be presumptuous because I didn't know if there were going to be other changes to make to the project agreement, but we have it signed. Jordan is on board.
And then Corey, on the record, we have a signed, executed project agreement, stamped, ready to go.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. That assuages my concerns then.
Are there any other questions for Corey or for Mr. Price?
Well, were you gonna, Corey, we kind of.
We did kind of jump you around.
Well, with Counselor Sampson, I owed you a date for Creekside.
Thank you.
The expiration of that TIF area is October 26, 2040.
Thank you.
I have a comment on the trust indenture itself. If you could go to page 23 for me. Is it okay if I ask some questions?
Yeah.
The new
Absolutely.
one. The very, very bottom line says project fund in there. That term's not defined anywhere in there. Are we able to, I assume it's supposed to say construction fund, but that's a pretty important provision in that contract because it discusses what happens if construction doesn't start and you have to start paying the interest down on the bond. And so I controlled F'd it while I was sitting up here as well, and project fund doesn't appear anywhere else.
Yes, we will make sure that gets defined
Okay.
prior to closing.
I believe it should say construction fund, but I don't want to assume.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, and then. We also approving the bond purchase agreement as well, then as part of the trust indenture.
This is, go ahead.
It's included in our packet, so that's why I'm trying to make sure. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, and I apologize for this phraseology because I'm sure it doesn't add any comfort, but the term you hear often is that the agreements are in substantially final form. But that typically means that what we're doing is filling in the closing information between the time you approve the document and the time we actually have a closing. If there are cleanup items like that definition you noted, we can do that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's something we can talk about just
Yeah,
offline?
we can do that offline
Okay,
if you prefer, absolutely.
Yeah. They're just minor things that I caught in the bond purchase agreement specifically that I just think may be out of place a little bit.
Evan, we are gonna vote on it, though. I know. this
Yeah,
happens a
okay,
lot.
fine. I'll just go to it real quick.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
I
Yeah.
think, because I think what you typically would leave open is like what the
Dates.
interest rate is, and you've got maximums that are included, but if there's,
Yeah.
typos or anything substantive.
Corey, do you have a copy of the bond purchase?
Corey, do you need one? I think, is this the whole
That's,
packet?
no, that's just the trust indenture.
I think it has the bonds in here. Right? Just the whole thing.
So on page 3, section D, it refers to Whitsett and Nooning PC as counsel to the town. Is that still accurate? I was gonna, I wasn't aware of, so I just wanted to make sure, because it spells it out specifically, instead of just counsel for the town, it says Whitsett and Nooning.
Okay, thank you.
I'm on page 3 of the bond purchase agreement. Okay.
Okay.
And then also on page 3, section 2, subsection A, it says, subject to all the terms and provisions of the project agreement, in parens, as defined in the indenture. And then I reviewed the indenture, and I don't see that the project agreement was defined, so that definition,
Add the project agreement.
yeah, it didn't make it into the indenture, but we refer to it in the bond purchase, so therefore, gotta bring them all together. And then let me just make sure I have my ducks in a row. I believe that's all the questions that I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
I apologize, I didn't mean to commandeer that.
President Plunkett, would it be all right to ask Brad if he's happy with everything, having come here to speak tonight? Would you be willing to step up and just share with us if everything's met your expectations?
Yeah, I mean, in general, yeah, I think, I know the other Brad has done a lot of work getting this buttoned up. I think this is what I was hoping to see, not having the newest version copy in front of me, but I just kind of reiterate what a few people have said. I mean, the whole group, I'm not necessarily representing, I'm the only one here from that group, but I've been involved and worked with Jordan and Matt through this whole time, so we've been very, they could have just not been receptive to this from the
Right.
start. So I think we approached them to kind of figure out, and this goes all the way back to the PUD, I mean, to try to get this to work out where it was, mutually beneficial, and I, knock on wood, we can make it happen, because it would be very beneficial to our district, as I said
Great.
earlier, so.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other questions from counselors for Corey, Matt, or anyone else? All right, I would remind council that this is a final reading for the ordinance 2024-11, and I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve on final reading ordinance 2024-11.
Second.
I have a first from Counselor Norris, a second from Vice President Burke. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is new business, a consideration of a resolution approving the expansion of the EDA and Holiday Farms allocation area and the creation of a new TIF allocation area. This is Resolution 2024-13. I would point out to counselors that this is a resolution, so this would be one vote on this. And we have Corey again.
This TIF resolution is the final step in the TIF process, which allows a bond to be taken out. So this resolution expands the boundaries of an existing EDA, the Holiday Farms EDA. And that project is located on the west side of Michigan Road. And we're expanding the EDA to incorporate the Century project. So this is a geographic boundary adjustment to an existing EDA, and that is the action item that you are taking up.
Are there any questions or comments from counselors? Again, I would reiterate that this is a resolution that comes to us, and it's one action. So, questions, comments? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 2024-13.
We have a first from Counselor Norris.
Second.
A second from Counselor Stein. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. All right, up next is other matters. Are there any other matters from counselors? Having none, I would just say, I think I'm going to send out an email on behalf of the council. And we've got rules and procedures to make sure we get everything in our hands well in advance. We had 3 different items on the agenda that were items we either received after our cutoff, and I don't think that's fair to Amy Lacy, who's got to put in all the effort to get this to us, and obviously expect counselors to review everything in time either. Makes for a lot of frustration from time to time, so. That's all I have for that. So, any other updates from counselors? Having none, I would make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
A second from Counselor Norris. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. The next regular town council meeting is scheduled for Monday, June 17, 2024, at 7:30 a.m. in the Zionsville Town Hall Council Chambers. Final notice will be posted in compliance with the Indiana Open Door Law. Thank you.